Hey everyone, welcome to Moreality, your channel for strictly React Native content. Today we're going to be talking about the useContextHook. This is used by React and React Native developers. Context provides a way to pass data through the component tree without having to pass prop down manually at every level, which is also known as prop drilling. So this can make us save a lot of time, save a lot of trouble. It can be used in situations where passing down data from, say, parent to child can be cumbersome for certain types of props, such as locale preference or UI theme, which are required by many components within an application. This shared data can be considered global for a tree of React components, such as current authenticated user, theme, or even preferred language. Context provides a way to share values like these between components without having to explicitly pass a prop through every level of the tree. So in today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use the useContextHook to adjust the font for multiple pages or screens, we can call it, that have content displayed in them. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. First, we're going to create what is known as a context. So I'm going to create a new folder, call it components. Inside there, we're going to create a file. It's going to be called font size context.js. So what we're going to do is const font size context is equal to create context, which we need to import from React. And in here we're going to pass the default value for the font size. We'll go ahead and start with a font size of 24, arbitrary number. And then we're going to export this as default. Okay. Then next we're going to create two components. One is going to be, we'll call it PageOne. And in here we're going to have our first page of content. So we'll call this function PageOne. Here we're going to pull in that context that we just created. We need to import useContext from React. And then we also need to import our font size context, the file that we just created here, which has our default value of 24. What I like to do is I like to separate my imports, where here we have React or third-party imports, and then here we have local imports. So now we're going to return a text component that'll say first page content. And then what we need to do is we need to say style is equal to font size is going to be the size that we get right here from our font size context. And then we just want to export default PageOne. So here what we've done is we imported useContext from React. We're importing our font size context from the file we just created. We're getting the size from font size context. which was set to 24. Then we're using the font size right here for the text. And then this is the content that we're going to be displaying in our text field. So now what we could see is go ahead and we'll create one more file like this. Call this page2.js. What we're going to do is we're going to take all of this, copy it into page2. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to highlight this one, press F2, and then now I'm going to change 1 to 2. Then I'll hit enter, and now you can see down here was also changed to page2. And then what we're going to change here is we'll call this second page content. This will remain the same, and we'll be setting the font size here. So now what we need to do is we're going to use our useContextHook. So I'm going to add a new file here. I'm going to call it useContextHook.js. And now what we're going to do here is we're going to set up the UI. So I'm going to go, here's a snippet that I have, RNFC, React Native Functional Component. So it imports React from me, style sheet view, a couple other things that I need. So here I'm not going to be using props, so I'll get rid of that. I'm going to say const, I'm going to create a state variable called size. Then we're going to have a function to set the size. And here we could just have a default size of 16. So we need to import useState. I'm going to turn off autosave just so we don't get a red screen just because some code hasn't been completed. And then what I want to do is I'm going to select this. I'm going to press Command-Shift-L. I have a little extension for that where it gives a nice little console.log message where it will put the text of the variable that you want to print out and then the variable itself, so we could see it in the console. Now what we're going to do is we're going to import a few things. So I want to display PageOne. There it is. It's going to import. That's self-closing. Then we're going to import also PageTwo. That's going to be self-closing as well. And then we need to create a view. And in here we're going to have a touchable opacity. And then inside that we're going to have the text. And the text is going to be a plus sign. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have the text from page 1 and then the text from page 2. And then we're going to have a plus sign here, minus sign here, and we could increase and decrease the font size. So let me go to app.js real quick. I'm going to, we could do it right here. useContextHook doesn't want to auto import. That's okay. Import. Okay, so here we got an error. This says view config getter callback for component useContextHook must be a function. Make sure to start component names with a capital letter. So what we need to do is go here and let's go ahead, change that to a capital letter, change this to a capital letter, save it, go here, change that. Reload. Okay. Here we need to import text. There we go. Need to import text here, save it. Import text here, save it. Okay, there we go. So you always got to make sure you, whatever components you use, you import them. Sometimes I forget to import them, sometimes they don't auto import, so you just got to double check those. Okay. Let's put a little margin bottom here. Let's say 20. Let's give it some more. 50. Okay. So now we're done with page 1, page 2, and font size context. So I'm going to close those. And then now we're going to finish working on this useContextHook. Then I'm going to show you where the useContext is actually kind of come into play. So let's go ahead, add some style to this view. Actually, let's throw one more touchable opacity for our minus button. Save it. Okay, now you can see the minus button there. It's touchable opacity. So now let's throw style onto here. Flex direction, we're gonna go with row. Then we give it a margin top of 50. Okay, then we're gonna style the touchable opacity and change a couple of the props here. I'm gonna say align items to center. We're gonna disable the button if size is equal to 41. So that number 41 was chosen because when I tested this out, these two text components maxed out the width of the simulator screen. So going beyond that is not really worth seeing. It just looks messy. So on press, we're going to set the size to size plus 5. So go up a font size of 5 each time. And here you could see that the size is 16, which is what we set the initial value to the use state here. So every time this is re-rendering, when I save it, we could see another console message saying size is 16. So now let's style this text. We're going to say, we're going to give it a margin of right. So we move over the minus sign so they're not too close to each other. I'm going to say font size is going to be 50. And this is the font size of the plus sign, not our text right here. So now let's style the minus sign. We're going to have very similar. So we could go ahead and copy and paste this into here. And now in this case, the minimum size is going to be 11. So when we press this button, the font size will go down, and when we press the plus sign, the font size will go up. So this is the biggest that we want it is 41, and the smallest that we want it is 11. In this case, we're going to be setting the size -5 for the font size. And for this, we're going to say style equals font size of 50, so it matches the same size as the other one. Okay. And then now, last thing that we're going to do is we're going to bring in our useContext now. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap our entire, let me import it first so you could see autocomplete. Say import font size context. And then now we could say dot, and now you see these three functions that properties that are available. One is the provider, one is the consumer, and one is the display name. So what's going to happen here is we're going to use the provider property, and then there's a property in there called value. We're going to use that to set the size, and we need to wrap the entire return statement. Hit save. Okay, so now what we did is we imported the font size context. We wrapped the entire return statement with the font size context.provider and passed the value of it called size, which is what the useState variable here is called. So we gave it a default of 16. So this means that whenever we increase the value here, when we press these touchable opacities, we're going to get a new value for size, which is going to be plus or minus 5, depending on if we press the plus sign or the minus sign. And then what's going to happen is if we press plus, we're going to get 16 plus 5, which is 21. That value gets passed here, so then the font size context has a value now of 21. Let's go ahead and say here, align items, center. There we go. So now we have a nice layout. Let's just check app.js to make sure everything is good. Yep, everything looks good. So now what should happen is when we press the plus, the font size of both of these text components, the first page and second page, should increase. And if we press the minus sign, they should decrease. And you can see here, we're getting the font size So let's see if we increase. Good, now the font size is 31. And now we could keep going, 36, 41. So that's our max size. If you're curious and you want to see why I picked that as the max size, I could show you when we go bigger. It gets messy. So maybe we could push it to 46 for the max size for this device. And now when we press minus, you could see the font size decreasing. 21, 16, 11. So this is the smallest size it can go. So that's the example of using the useContextHook. Just to recap, what we did was first we created a font size context file component, and we imported create context for that from React. We gave it a default value of 24, and then we exported it, and then we created two page components, which rendered a text component for each. And from there, we imported font size context, and we imported useContext from React. And then we got the size from useContext, font size context. So when you call useContext, you have to say which context do you want to use. And of course, we're going to use font size context for this. So here we pass the size. So this is why when back here, when this size is changing, because we set it when we press the touchable opacity, which is the plus or minus sign, then we pass the value called size into this value property for the font size context.provider. That's why when it uses the context here, it's getting the size that's changing, and then it's setting the font size to that new size that was passed here. And the same thing is occurring on PageTwo, which we just added those as two components right here. So the way that this works is you have your context file, you have your components that you want to use that value that's changing, and those components have to be wrapped inside of the context.provider, in this case font size context.provider. So that completes the use of context hook tutorial. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comment section. If you have any other things that you would like to see, maybe more examples, more details, more hooks, more builds, anything you'd like to see, please drop it in the comments section. We're going to be doing another hook tomorrow. There is a total of 13 hooks, so today was the third. So we have 10 more hooks to go. The plan is to do a deep dive into React Native, so we could get a good understanding of what exactly we're doing here, how all this ties together, why React is important with regards to React Native. So if this is content that's interesting to you, please like and subscribe. Continue to follow along. Next month or so, we will be getting into full builds, front end and back end. So if there's any clone or build you'd like to see, something you're interested in, please drop it in the comments section. And that's all we have for today. Have a great day. Bye.